Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about state. Okay, now you may not know quite what I mean by state. Um, you can either be in a good state or a bad state, meaning it's basically your mood, how you're feeling at that particular time. All right, now of course, I'm a happy person. I've got this channel which is called World Class Happiness, and I consider myself a super happy person. I'm always, to a certain extent, happy. Um, but even me, occasionally I get in the wrong state, in which case, if people were to meet me for the first time when I'm in the wrong state, and they were to just come across me as when I was in a bad mood or a bad state, they might assume that I'm not a happy person. They might assume that I'm actually a grumpy person, or an angry person, or whatever. But um, we all get in the wrong state occasionally. You can have a happy person who can get in a bad state, and you can have an unhappy person even who gets in a happy state. So state is something that is a kind of a, is kind of a something that can be changed and can change quite quickly. Whereas I would say your story is how you feel about yourself more generally, most of the time. Okay, now my story is that I'm a happy person. That's me. That's how I feel I am as a person. But like I say, I can get in a bad state, and what you've got to be able to do is to be able to change that. That's the key a lot of the time, because if you get in the wrong state, then quite often what happens is you can't function well or function correctly. And as time's gone along, as I've got a little bit older and a little bit more experienced and understand psychology and happiness and stuff like that more, I'm able to control my states a lot easier. All right, not always, because I'm a human being, the same as the rest of us. But state is something that you can control. All right, now when you feel that you're in the wrong state, or you're moving into the wrong state, what you've got to do is obviously be aware of that. First of all, you've got to notice that you're in the wrong state. That's the first thing. And then you've then got to try to bring yourself out of that as fast as you possibly can. And sometimes I know what it's like. Sometimes if you're in the wrong state or in a bad mood, the last thing you want to do is actually change. Sometimes you want to wallow in that kind of self pity, or you feel sorry for yourself, or you're annoyed and you kind of actually want to stay in that state. But as we all know, it doesn't generally do us any good. All right, so what we've got to try and do is the same as everything, same as being happy, same as habits. You've got to train yourself to be able to change your state. You can train yourself to change your state. Now, there was a time where it used to kind of sometimes be done for me. All right, and I mentioned in my book World Class Happiness um, about a couple of times where my state was changed for me. All right, so the two examples, I'll just give you the two examples quickly. The first one was, this is something really small. I was going to the shop and I was having a bad day. Things weren't going well for me, and um, and it weren't even big things. That was just an accumulation of lots of different things that weren't really working out that particular day. It was just one of those days. And I was just popping out to the shop, and Claire, my wife, said to me, "Oh, can you just get this thing from the shop?" And as I was going out the door, she was like, "Oh, and could you get this?" And I'm, "Oh, and that," and I'm like, I think I've got about three things on top of the things that I already had to get. So I've got this little list, and I'm really pushed for time. I've got things I need to do. I've got to then go and maybe take a judo session or whatever, and I feel like I'm behind schedule. And there's been lots of um, things that have put me behind schedule, and I don't feel any of it's my fault. And I feel like I've really kind of I've just had one of them days, and I'm going out, and I've now been given this longer shopping list, and I get to the shop, and I'm already annoyed, and I get into the shop, and then a beep goes on my phone. I get my phone out, and it's Claire again, and she's now added to my list, adding another 3 items to my list, and I'm really annoyed. All right, it's nothing serious, but I was just in the wrong state. Okay, now I'm I'm looking round, I'm getting a few bits, and then I don't know, there's just something that I can't remember. She's given me this list to add on to the list I already had, and I can't remember the things that she'd already mentioned while we were indoors. And I'm kind of looking at the shelves like this, and I'm kind of like looking up and down, and I'm just, obviously I'm in the shopping zone, and I'm just aimlessly just wandering about. And as I'm walking up and down the aisles and I'm looking at the shelves, I'm thinking, in a minute I'm gonna see the thing that I'm meant to be buying, and it's gonna jog my memory, and I'm gonna grab it. And I'm walking around the shop like this, and I must have had a face on like this, and I'm trying to work out what it is that I've got to buy, and then out of the corner of my eye, in my peripheral vision, I just see this bloke, this guy, standing probably closer to me than would be comfortable, and he's looking straight at me. You know when you get a sense that somebody's staring right at you, and I just turned to look at him, and he had this really stupid smile on his face, like he knew me, and he goes, "I know that face," and I went, and I'm trying in that split second, I'm trying to suss out who it is. I'm thinking, do I know this guy? I'm thinking like it's like as if he knew me, but I didn't know him, and I'm racking my brain in this sort of quick sort of 2-3 seconds, trying to think, where do I know him from? And I'm thinking, do I pretend I know him? Is it just going to pop into my head? And while I'm kind of panicking about how I'm going to deal with the situation, he then goes, "Yep, that face." He goes, "That face," and I'm kind of looking confused. He goes, that's the male shopping face, that is." And I'm like, "Sorry?" He goes, "The male shopping face." He said, "The missus has sent you out to get some shopping, get some bits, and you've forgotten what you got to get." And honestly, it doesn't sound funny now saying it like this, but I just burst out laughing, and it was it was like the funniest thing in that particular moment. And even though, like I say, it doesn't sound funny now, but I just burst out laughing. The guy then burst out laughing, and we were kind of like laughing together. Never met the guy. I realised that I didn't actually know him at all. He was just a complete stranger, and that made it, the fact that he was a stranger made it even funnier. And the fact that he recognised that I recognised what he was talking about made us both laugh. And all of a sudden, I'm in a different state, and I didn't even actually realise that my state had changed. And then I finally did finish my shopping. I got in the queue, and I'm still giggling at this guy, and then I'm I'm driving home, and I'm still kind of giggling about it, and then I get home, and I give Claire the bits and all the other things, and I'm sort of loading them out of the car, and I'm sort of like I'm taking them through to the kitchen. I'm telling Claire this story, and we're then having a laugh about that, and obviously what it's done is I walked out in a really poor state, and I've come back in a really different state, a happy state, and I didn't actually even realise that I'd snapped out of it. I just had snapped out of it, and it was all down to this one guy who I didn't know, who come out with this little joke, which probably weren't even that funny. It just come at the right time, okay, and this was the thing, and it changed my whole day from that point. And I've had several things like that, and you might sort of think, well, that's just something small. Maybe you weren't in such a bad mood. I've got real issues. I've got real depression, or I've got real problems. It's going to take more than just some guy in a shop, saying a little joke to change how I feel, change my state, because I'm constantly in this annoyed, angry state. And I disagree, and the reason I disagree is because the worst day of my life um, was when I was in hospital, and I'll tell you my hospital story another time. Um, and I was badly ill, um, and I'd been given some news that was was going to completely change my life. Um, it was literally the worst day of my whole life, and I'd, there was a day that I'd been upset. I'd actually cried, and I'd been upset to an extent. It wasn't floods of tears, but I'd been upset to the extent where I had kind of lost it a little bit. Um, and it was a sad day for me. I'm actually feeling sad talking about it already, and um, and and I was at my lowest point on that particular day. That's the worst day of my life, and I was I was kind of in a little bit of a trance to an extent. I was in a little bit of a sort of, it didn't really matter what was going on around me because I was so consumed by my thoughts and how this was going to change my life. And while I was sat there in this state, which for me at that particular time, that's the closest I've ever been to being depressed, I guess. And I was in a hospital bed, and I was next to this old guy, um, and he was in the next bed, and the guy was kind of laid out, and he was in a bad way. I don't know what was the problem with him, but he was an old guy. He must have, I don't know, he looked about 150, but he probably, I don't know what he was at, in his 80s or 90s, I don't really know. Um, and all of a sudden, he done the most gigantic fart that you've ever heard. It was enormous, and it just rumbled through the whole ward, and I've never heard a fart that loud in my life. And I am a bit of a kid when it comes to stuff like that. I'm quite immature, and I burst out laughing again. And it was just a reaction. It wasn't, and I wasn't laughing at him. I was kind of laughing at the situation. Again, the fact that I was in the worst day of my life, and all of a sudden something as simple as a fart, a loud fart, had literally just snapped me out of it straight away. And I was in fits of laughter, not out loud. I was just kind of like trying to stifle it because the guy was next to me, and I was facing the other way, and I was literally in floods of tears again, in a good way this time, because I couldn't stop myself from laughing at what had just happened. And that one day was like an emotional roller coaster, because like it was just 1 minute I'm feeling at my lowest, and then honestly the next second I'm just like inconsolable with my laughter, and I couldn't, inconsolable, you know what I mean. I literally couldn't stop myself from laughing, and and yeah, it was just one of them funny moments, one of them moments that um, I've got no real idea why I felt like that all of a sudden. And um, the point I'm making is, it doesn't really matter what's going on in your life. If the right thing comes along, your state can change. All right, I'm getting to going around the houses a little bit, but your state can alter even on your worst day. So what I wanted to find out was how I could do that without the man in the shop, without the guy next to me in the hospital bed. I wanted to be able to change my own state without needing somebody else or something else to change it for me. And I learned how to do it. I was just watching simple videos online. This was years later when I was studying happiness, and just ways that you can change your state. There's several ways you can change your state, but the first way is literally just to change your physiology, your posture. All right, so you could sit up more, your shoulders could be back. If you're standing up, you could stand up. You could put your hands on your hips. You could, you raise your head up. You breathe more deeply rather than shallow. And you feel straight away by doing that, you feel a lot more happy, a lot more in control. And that's the opposite to somebody who is depressed. So if you think of somebody who is depressed, if somebody says to you that they're depressed, you could pretty much, so somebody, let's say you're talking on the phone to somebody and you can't actually see them, and they were telling you how depressed they felt, how low they felt, and you can hear it in their voice. You can imagine how they would look on the end of that phone, even though you can't see them. They would, I'm sure, 100%, they'd have their head down, they'd be slumped like this, they'd be breathing shallow, that things would kind of, their shoulders would be hunched, they would kind of be in this position here, like the opposite to what I just said. So if you can change by shoulders back and improving your posture and breathe more deeply so your chest comes up, if you're walking, maybe walking with a longer stride, or and just feel more in control, more powerful to a certain extent. If you do those things, just those little things, even if you've had the worst day possible, you will feel better. All right. Now, if on top of that you then put a massive smile on your face and then try to be depressed with a smile on your face, it's impossible. You try to think about something that really upsets you or makes you feel miserable, and try to think about that with a smile on your face, or try and talk about being depressed with a smile on your face. It's literally impossible. All right, so that's the first thing, just to change your physiology, change the way you move, change the way you're standing, change the way you walk, and you'll find that makes a big difference. Okay, and then probably you'll start feeling different, and thinking different, and then you're more likely to have a better day from that point. Okay, so don't wait for something else or someone else to change your state. Be in control of that and be able to do it yourself. Okay,